How did life begin? I mean, it's one of the biggest questions out there, right? So today, we're going to break it all down, step by step. We're going to look at the origin of life not as some random miracle, but as a totally fascinating scientific puzzle. All right, let's dive in.
Yeah, this quote, it just sets the tone perfectly, doesn't it? It's all about logic. See, we're not hunting for some magical 1 in a billion chance event. Nope. What we're doing here is piecing together a logical sequence of chemical steps, the kind of steps that could actually explain how life got started.
Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we'll tackle the big question itself. Then, we'll zip back in time to check out the conditions on early Earth. After that, we'll see how life's basic building blocks could have popped into existence, how they got together, and, this is the big one, how that crucial spark of replication could have happened. All right, first up, let's get right to the heart of it. What's the fundamental mystery we're trying to unravel here?
So the fancy scientific name for this whole process is abiogenesis. And it's super important to get this straight. This is not the same thing as evolution. Evolution, that's all about how life changes and adapts once it's already up and running. Abiogenesis, though, that's the prequel. It's the story of how life got started from scratch.
And this is the real core of it all. Look, the question isn't if life came from non-living stuff. I mean, we're here, right? So clearly it did. The real head-scratcher is how. How does a jumble of simple chemicals, just doing their thing according to the laws of physics, suddenly organize? How do they cross that mind-boggling line and become, well, alive? Okay, so before any experiment can happen, you need to know about the lab, right? So let's set the stage. What did our planet, this giant planetary laboratory, actually look like 4 billion years ago?
You gotta picture it. Early Earth was a totally alien world. I mean, completely different from today. The atmosphere, it was what scientists call reducing. All that really means is there was no free oxygen floating around to just, rust and break down complex molecules the second they formed. And energy? Whoa, there was a ton of it. We're talking constant lightning storms, volcanoes erupting everywhere, and just brutal UV radiation from the sun. And that right there, that combination of simple chemicals plus a crazy amount of energy, that's the absolute key. So think about it. If you've got that kind of setup, all those simple ingredients in a high-energy pressure cooker, what's the next logical step? What would you expect to happen, chemically speaking? Well, you'd probably expect some of those simple things to start forming more complex things, like the basic building blocks of life.
And this isn't just a guess. This was actually shown in the famous Miller-Urey experiment. They basically took methane, ammonia, and water, gases we think were all over early Earth, zapped them with a spark to act like lightning, and guess what happened? They made amino acids. The little individual Lego bricks that build proteins? The logic here is just, it's undeniable. You take the raw ingredients, you add energy, and bam, you get the basic parts for life.
All right, so we've got our Lego bricks, our monomers. That's a huge step. But, a pile of bricks isn't a spaceship, right? It's not life yet. The next step is a really big one. These simple little blocks have to actually link up and form longer, more complex chains. We call those polymers.
So how did that happen? Well, scientists think that on early Earth, this could have happened on the surfaces of clay or maybe in little tidal pools that were constantly evaporating and refilling. That kind of environment would have squished all those monomers together, making it way easier for them to link up. And when they did, the amino acids formed proteins. Those are like the little machines that do all the work in a cell. And other building blocks, nucleotides, they formed nucleic acids. That's the really important stuff that carries information.
And now we get to what is probably the most critical, most mind-blowing step in this whole story. Because even a complex soup of molecules, it's still just a soup. It isn't alive. To cross that line, you need one more thing. The one thing that truly defines biology, the ability to make copies of yourself, replication.
The best idea we have for solving this puzzle is something called the RNA world hypothesis. It's this awesome theory that suggests that before we had DNA and before we had proteins as we know them, there was just RNA. And here's why that's so cool. RNA is like a multi-talented superstar. It could do both of the essential jobs. It could store genetic info, kind of like DNA does, but it could also act like a protein and actually make chemical reactions happen, including, and this is the absolute kicker, making copies of itself.
Yeah, this breakdown really makes it clear. Think of DNA.
It's that classic double helix, super stable. It's perfect for being the master blueprint, the archive that you lock away for safekeeping. But it's also kind of passive. It doesn't do a whole lot on its own. But then you look at RNA. It's a single strand, it's a versatile worker bee, it can carry the instructions, sure, but it can also fold itself up into all kinds of crazy shapes and act like a little machine to actually get the job done. It's the blueprint and the builder, all in one package, and that's what makes it the #1 suspect for being the very first self-replicating molecule.
Okay, so let's take a step back and put all the pieces together. Let's recap the whole logical sequence we've just walked through, from basic chemistry to the very first hints of life.
This timeline just lays it all out so perfectly. You start way back here, about 4 billion years ago, with nothing but a soup of simple, non-living molecules, okay? Then, the environment adds a ton of energy, which kicks us to the next step. You get monomers, those basic building blocks. Then those guys start linking up into polymers, like RNA. And that leads to the giant leap, self-replication, the RNA world. And from there, the very last step is getting these little self-copying systems wrapped up in a protective bubble, a membrane, which forms the first protocells. You see, it's just a clear, step-by-step, logical progression.
And that brings us to one last, really mind-bending question. If the beginning of life isn't some impossible 1 in a trillion fluke, but instead it's a pretty logical outcome of basic chemistry and physics, then what does that imply when we look up at the sky? At the billions, maybe trillions of other planets out there? Suddenly, the question isn't just about where we came from. It's about our place in the entire cosmos. Logically speaking, what are the chances we're actually alone? Now that is something to think about.